Hi everyone, Redhead Whiskey today, Redhead Whiskey here, and today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Alex Clark and Amy from Fort Hamilton, the founders and visionary behind New York's Rye Distillery. So, Alex, you've carved out a very special space for spirits in the New York scene. So, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you. So Alex, one of the reasons why I'm having these interviews is to understand why would someone do such a thing of opening a distillery. It sounds like a lot of fun, but also a lot of work. So why?
Um, I think what we wanted to achieve with Fort Hamilton Distillery was the recreation of the original whiskey style of America, which is New York rye whiskey. So most people just assume that Kentucky bourbon, is the classic American whiskey style because during our lifetimes that's been the most popular whiskey in America. But as a matter of fact, the earliest whiskey style in America was actually rye whiskey coming out of the Northeast of America. And we're talking about in the 1700s at this point. And the only reason that it disappeared and production was halted in the Northeast of America was prohibition, which killed all the distilleries that were active in the Northeast at the time. And then after the government enacted corn subsidies, it became quite uncompetitive to create rye whiskies, which are made with rye grain predominantly, and made it much less expensive to produce corn whiskies, which is what bourbon is. And so ultimately, bourbon became the biggest whiskey in America in the 20th century, not because it was a better whiskey than rye, but because the government legislation made it happen. And so, we come from a cocktail bartending background, and if you look at the original cocktails of America, most of the whiskey cocktails are based on rye whiskey, not bourbon whiskey. So if
Hmm.
you want to have a really authentic
Oh,
Manhattan, you should have it with a New York rye whiskey. At least that's what we thought. And so, looking around, there was no New York rye whiskey. So it was like, well, okay, let's build a distillery and start making it again. And I think that I was fortunate enough to know that this wasn't a complete act of craziness, because our friend Dan, we helped him launch the Widow Jane distillery in 2011. I was
mhm.
sales, and he had buildings in Red Hook that he wanted to do something with. So, Widow Jane came about, and part of the journey there involved sourcing barrels from Kentucky and Indiana. And so I managed to, on one of the trips down there, taste some rye whiskey from northeast of America that was distilled in the early 1900s, uh, and made in a classic northeastern style with no corn, just rye grain and malted barley. And this whiskey blew me away. So I was like, well, this is the best whiskey I've tasted in America in a long, long time. Why are we not making this whiskey again? And that sort of led to the discovery of this government legislation that torpedoed rye whiskey production, and also gave us the faith that what we were doing wasn't completely crazy, and that if we did it, we might have delicious results, and people might be excited by that. So decentralizing the whiskey production model from the five big distilleries in Kentucky that ended up ruling the roost in the 20th century became quite the mission. And so we've been busy squirreling away whiskey now since 2016, um, in a classic New York style. So we make our rye with 90% rye grain and 10% malted barley, no corn whatsoever. And we just
Across
celebrate.
all of your products?
None of our ryes ever have corn in them. Correct. So the double barrels are a blend of two recipes. Neither of
Hmm.
them have any corn in them. And the single barrel rye that we offer and the cask strength rye that I think you have a bottle of hiding around there somewhere, are made. Yeah, well, there you go. That's the
Yeah,
one.
it's almost a very worrying level of whiskey here. So it's
Well, I
yeah,
know where you can get some
I'm
more.
being cheap on trying it, yeah, on tasting it.
Yeah. So yeah, those single barrel styles are 100% New York grain, and made with 90% rye and 10% malted barley. So a very classic northeastern style, and a similar mash bill to the one that I had tasted down in Kentucky. This early example of a rye whiskey from the early 1900s. So I knew we weren't crazy, and we really did. We really did try and go down the rabbit hole and do it as authentically as possible. So we used 30-gallon barrels for the first few years, which are more indicative of the size that would have been around
Mm-hmm.
the 1700s. We heat the barrels during the winter, so they have a little bit of additional maturation opportunity, because the average temperature of the barrels is a little warmer than if they were just sitting in a rick house in a field, outside somewhere.
So you're using temperature controlled warehouses
Yes.
to control the.
So we're based in Industry City in Sunset Park, Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Those buildings are from the late 1800s. They were built, and they're very well built.
Mm-hmm.
Like modern buildings. These things are constructed with reinforced concrete and bricks, and they have steam generators in the courtyards of all the buildings, and so those steam generators produce millions of BTUs of heat, which get pumped around the buildings all winter long.
Right.
Live
Okay.
Monday to Friday. So it's a really excellent conditions for barrel aging whiskeys in. So in the summer they get nice and hot, and in the winter they are warmed a little additionally. And traditionally, that's how northeastern whiskeys were aged, because whiskey aging is a complex business with lots of variables, and one of the main variables is actually temperature. And so, whiskeys in Texas, they have a problem with, because the barrels get too hot, and the whiskeys come out looking black after 3 years, overly.
If there's any left.
They're air conditioning their barrels, which is, I'm sure, hideously expensive and not great for the environment. I think, we in the Northeast, because our winters are colder and longer, giving the barrels an additional little push in temperature is a good thing.
All barrels are kept in Industry City?
Mostly, yeah. So every barrel goes through there, but we don't like paying Brooklyn rent on all the barrels, just most of the barrels. But most of them spend at least 2 or 3 years there before they go into production.
So one of the things I keep hearing about is how rye is notoriously hard and difficult to work with. Is it true?
It is true. I mean, it's gloopier and more frothy when you distill it, more sticky and gelatinous.
Mm-hmm.
But and of course, it doesn't contain as much starch as corn, so you'll yield lower. So it's more expensive, but ultimately, ultimately, it's more tasty than corn. So the trade-off is, that you end up with additional flavor and deeper an experience than just using corn. And so, a lot of ryes in America are actually made with corn.
Mm-hmm.
The rule is it has to be 51% rye.
Right.
And so a lot of people use 51% rye, 49% corn. It was only 1% away from being a bourbon, actually. But for us, that's not how whiskeys were made back in the day. And people are using corn because it's inexpensive and gives you a higher yield. But they're not doing it for flavor reasons, in my opinion.
So that's a great point. And in terms of working with some, rye that has different components to pricing, but obviously the demand is growing, and you're a growing distillery. So how do you work with that and with keeping, offering products but keeping it sustainable?
Well, that's a good question. It's tricky. I mean, it's a fine, delicate balance that we strike. Amy manages our fantastic tasting room and does an incredible job of it.
Mm-hmm.
The income from that tasting room is crucial to continuing to develop the brand and continuing to lay down barrels of whiskey and continuing to increase the age statements on the whiskeys too. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that it's financially crippling to start your own whiskey company because you're deliberately not selling your inventory for years,
Mm-hmm.
which no other business on the planet deals with, really. And you generally, if you make something as a business, you then try and sell it as quickly as possible, and then make some more of it. That's not what we do in the whiskey business. We make it, and then we don't sell it, and then we make more of it. Don't sell that, and then we make more, and then we don't sell that either. So you very quickly you end up with a cash flow crunch. So it's really important to make other parts of the business pull together to kind of paper over the crack that the whiskey production creates. So it's a very complicated business. We run, not just whiskey production, but we also make gin, distilled in Brooklyn on a beautiful pot still
Mm-hmm.
down there, and we do vodka as well, and all the different factors pulled together to help us continue to keep our prices the same. And so we're not raising prices. We've never raised our prices, even though the whiskey has gotten older and older and keeps increasing in quality. Our prices stay the same. We have to make sure that we're competitive with not just other craft distilleries, but also with every other distillery in America, which is tricky because a lot of these distilleries well established. They've got millions of barrels in their inventories. They have large marketing teams. They have large sales teams. They work with the biggest distributors, and they have huge economies of scale. Most distilleries in America actually make money before they've sold a bottle of whiskey because they repackage their spent grain, dehydrate it, and sell it as animal feed. So they're already turning a profit before they've sold a bottle of whiskey, which is, nice for them. And if you're doing it on this huge industrial scale, that's doable. But for a small player like us, that's not feasible. So we're already like facing these huge disadvantages. So for us, it's super important that we find the few advantages that we do have and focus on them. So we're a local distillery in Brooklyn. We're in a very large market right here. So we take care to make as many friends as we possibly can. And having the tasting room in Brooklyn is a huge, huge advantage for us. And so we focus heavily on that. And Amy runs that admirably.
So am I hearing correctly that one of the benefits of distilling in New York is actually the community that you have around you, an industry city?
Yeah, and in the boroughs and the tri-state area, we get a lot of visitors that come because we're located on the subway line. We try to give back and become a part of the community as well. So we offer tours, to nonprofits, for schools, to raise money for their PTAs, and try to focus on actually giving as much as we receive too. So we love that people come and visit and taste our spirits. We have a great tasting room where people can come and enjoy each other's company, learn about local spirit production.
Make your own bottle of whiskey.
You can now make your own bottle of whiskey. And we're just, I think that they're in production right now. So everyone can have their own label that they can hand sign their bottle. And we offer tours on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So that's been big for us to be able to bring people in and sort of help them understand about our process and what makes us special and what makes us unique and how they can drink local spirits, and they actually are affordable and they actually taste really good.
Yeah, that's the other.
What does differentiate Fort Hamilton rye from other distilleries in the U.S.?
I think because we're a small, independently owned and operated business, we're allowed to focus more on quality than large distilleries who are focused on returning their investors and shareholders profits, because that is what you do when you're a corporation. That is literally the law. You have to focus on being profitable before you focus on anything else, and that's why. That's why a lot of distilleries in America started making decreasingly good whiskey in the 20th century, because they were told to use less expensive ingredients. And unfortunately, if you want to make the best quality product, you have to use the best ingredients. And so we focus on using the best ingredients to make the highest quality products with the best flavor profile. Whereas, shareholders at Jim Beam or Diageo are not that interested in that. They want profits, please. So you can look at the history of distillers in Kentucky, and they'll readily admit that they are being told to use less malted barley and less rye grain and more corn because it's free. So I think that one of the biggest distinctions we have is with those larger distilleries is that we actually do focus first and foremost on the quality, and other distilleries cannot say that. So that's one of the biggest advantages we have. And then, like Amy said, like working with local communities, we just got our whiskeys, all of our products actually certified kosher by the Orthodox Union, so we could better.
Really, that's huge.
So we can better serve the community in South Brooklyn, where we are located, and North Brooklyn, and everywhere.
Yeah.
Basically.
It's a very, absolutely. I know the demand for that is very strong.
Absolutely.
That's a very good move. Yeah.
So we've really focused on that so that we can be more inclusive with the community. We just sponsored the Brooklyn Bridge Park Conservancy fundraising ball and donated spirits for 500 guests to enjoy the course of the night. We're sponsoring the Brick Jazz Fest in Brooklyn this week as well. So reaching out to the community and being sharing our spirits with the community is really important to us as well. And I think that differentiates us too.
100%. And I personally resonate with that. I think just on a personal note, that's one of the things that really drew me into your distillery. When I met you, we were doing the 10 distilleries in 10 weeks.
I remember that. Yes.
And 100% the club members were magnetized to the distillery, feeling that spirit of community. I think when you do community, it echoes through your approach, and it's 100% resonating in your approach. As a consumer, I can definitely attest to that. So what is your favorite release from everything that you've done so far?
Oh, it's a tricky one.
We should tell her about the Continental collection. And
sure. I mean, we just keep doing things which people seem to like. So the single barrel bourbon came out this year. We've been sitting on those barrels for 5 years, and that just picked up 95 points in Wine Enthusiast, and I think is going to be in the top 100 spirits of 2024, which is very exciting. The single barrel rye, the age statement is 5 years now. We just had a party to celebrate this week. And obviously that's the whiskey that started it all. And one of the reasons that we just started this thing in the first place was to build that project and that style of whiskey and bring that style of whiskey back to life. So we're very proud of that one too. And the cask strength version that you have in your hand is the most unadulterated view, I think, of New York rye that we've had in over a century. So it's really exciting to see that come to life and to see people's expressions when they taste it, because it really does taste fantastic. And we surprise a lot of people. I think, sometimes craft whiskeys can be a little underwhelming. And I think people, are really appreciative of the quality that we're offering in not just that bottle, but everything that we do. We've also done some barrel finishing projects, which are fun little side projects for us. We have an Armagnac finished cask strength rye whiskey. We have a Madeira finished cask strength rye whiskey, which is sensational. Like the Madeira is nutty and it's got fruit and raisin and chocolate on it. And when that blends with the rye, it's just a phenomenal combination.
It is.
We recently released a mead finished rye whiskey, which is exciting because that's a little personal project that I wanted to get into, because my granddad was a mead maker and a beekeeper who unfortunately passed away before I was born, but he did write a book on the subject. So I read it and got inspired and met the best mead maker in America and gave him some barrels to age his mead in, and then he gave them back to me to age my whiskey in. So our whiskey, pardon me. And so ultimately that was a fun project. We are also undertaking a collaborative project with Privateer Rum out of New England. They're out of Boston area. They make the best rum in America. So we've given them 3 freshly dumped barrels of Fort Hamilton rye to finish their rum in. And they gave us 3 freshly dumped rum barrels to finish our rye in.
We'll be waiting for that.
Yeah, there's going to be a rum finished rye in our future. We are patient people, and so our barrel finishes age for a minimum of 1 year up to 2 years. So they really do become this one collaborative flavor profile. And so we're excited about those.
They're taking me back to a few months ago. I visited your distillery with a friend of mine who, on a personal level, he has extremely high standards. And the corner of his eye, he was able to see the Armagnac cask. And he immediately grabbed onto that one. He was stunned with it. He fell in love with it. And that's one of the casks that are still, registered very strongly with me.
Nice.
So what are your plans for the next 5 years? What's on the roadmap for Fort Hamilton?
That's a good question. I'm trying to not do too many new things.
No more than that.
Because we already have lots of products at different price points. Now we've got vodka, we've got gin, we've got the double barrel rye, the single barrel rye, the double barrel bourbon, and the single barrel bourbon. So the double barrels work really well in bar programs and in cocktail programs. We just released liter bottles of those 2 into the market, which the on-premise is very excited about. So cocktail bartenders can now use local New York product in their cocktail programs without breaking the bank, which is very exciting. We're going to continue to see the age statements push out on the single barrel bourbon, single barrel rye, and cask strength variants of those. I think that we're also now like fastest growing distillery in New York, and we want to keep being that and focus on growing our business within New York, and maybe slightly further afield too, but without losing focus. I think it's so easy in this business to get starstruck and go into like 15 different states, but then not focus on any of them because you're just too busy, spinning around. And so we're really committed to continuing to grow ourselves in New York, and maybe take on, a couple more states as we grow. Amy's from Texas.
Yeah, well, we have the tri-state area and Kentucky and Indiana and California and Pennsylvania, but the thing is we're available in all 50 states. So people can order online and have it delivered to their house. So technically we have distribution. And the great thing is so many people come to New York, or people come to visit you, and you bring them to the distillery, and they can go home and, even if they can't go down to their bottle shop, they can order it and have it in a few days. So
yeah,
that's been really powerful, a good tool for us.
Yeah.
Okay. So last question. what advice would you give someone who wants to open a distillery? Asking for a friend.
Don't. That was a first one. No,
Don't
just
do
try.
it.
You have
I
to.
think have a good understanding of the business first, and the business model is quite frightening, because if you start putting the numbers on paper, you're like, well, wait, where's all the money? Where? So it takes, I would say, probably a good, at least 5, probably closer to 10 years to really be profitable in the whiskey business. We're 8 years into it at this point, so we're getting over the hump, but it's not for the faint of heart. And the business is constantly challenging, and that there are regulatory challenges, baked into the 3-tier system of distribution in America that you just can't get around. You got to play the game, and everyone's playing it, playing hardball, and you have large distilleries that aren't interested in you succeeding. So you have to be aware of that. And, I think we both come from hospitality. So we were aware of a lot of the challenges, and then, launching Widow Jane made us aware of even more of the challenges. So we had a good grounding in 2 different sides of the business before we set out on this journey. And I think the other bit of advice would be, don't quit the day job until you got yourself established.
Unless
you happen to have bags of cash lying around, which is, great. We were not ever in that position, but I do think that, the fact of the negative cash flow means that you really have to be careful about what you do with your money. So we were very careful about not spending money. Take the bus, don't take an Uber. That's give anyone getting into this business, like, save all the money you can, because you're going to need it to put into barrels of whiskey. And it's a very challenging stuff, but it's very rewarding. You can get it right,
Okay, thank you so much. That was really that was great. That was great. And again,
having us.
From a consumer perspective, I have to say you were able to, in a very competitive landscape, build a very unique voice and brand that is that echoes with the community and goes from ear to mouth. So it's great. Mouth to ear, ear to mouth.
Thank you.